and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to see you here. My name is Kika and today I'm going to take you through a knit tutorial for the Sailor Swift top, which is the top that I am currently wearing. The Sailor Swift top is the one that I am currently wearing. It is a very chic top-down knit top. So this is worked from top to down. I've worked mine in a cotton yarn and it has these kind of narrow stripes, and then you bind off with an I-cord bind off here at the armholes and also at the collar. This one has been absolutely one of my favorites in my wardrobe already. It's very basic and I just wanted to have something striped that I could pair with a pair of jeans or a skirt. When it gets colder, back in the autumn, I can just have this underneath a hoodie or a blazer. And the good thing about tops is, of course, they are very quick to knit. In this video, I'm going to show you step by step everything that goes into making the Sailor Swift top. I am going to make another sample using these two colors. I definitely recommend that you download the pattern by clicking the link below and then you can follow along. So here I'm going to take you through every step by step, but you definitely need the pattern to complete this project. But in this video, I'm going to give you some tips. I'm going to show you also just the construction, then how to make these I-cord bind off edges for the armholes and for the collar, which I personally love this. I just think it's such a professional finish. The nice thing about knitting tops is that they are very quick because you don't have the sleeves, and this is also quite tight fitting with some negative ease, which means that when you're choosing the size for this, you'll see in the sizes they have some negative ease, and that is because knitted fabric stretches out a lot, and this one is intended to be quite snug, so there isn't like a lot of positive ease in that. And when you wear it, or at least I feel, oh, there's an ant here. Oh, hello. No, hi. It's trying to bite me. The dangers of filming outside in the wild. As I was saying, knitted fabric stretches out quite a lot, and I definitely feel mine, I've been wearing it a lot, so it has stretched out just a little bit. So I definitely encourage you to measure yourself, usually at your bust or wherever you're widest, to get the correct fit. Now, the Sailor Swift top is worked on 3mm, so that's a US 2.5mm needle. Of course, this might depend a little bit on your gauge, so I do always recommend that you make a gauge swatch before beginning. And it's worked top down, which also means that you can customize the length to fit exactly your needs and how long you want it to be. But all right, enough talk, let's get right into it. All right, let's begin. So the Sailor Swift top is worked from top down, and we're gonna start by casting on stitches and working the upper back. So here we're just gonna cast on stitches, gonna work this back and forth and do some increases here. Then we pick up stitches for the shoulders. You can see here, I picked up stitches, and we do that separately for the left and the right front. Those are worked separately, then they are joined, and then again, we're working some increases here. And then lastly, everything is joined together to work the body in the round. And there I will show you a trick how to work these stripes jogless. And then lastly, we have the grand finale, the I-cord bind off edge, which gives it such a professional and just really nice overall finish. So those are the things we are going to go through in this tutorial. I am going to be using one of my absolute favorite cotton yarn. It's called Mandarin Petite by Sannes Garn. I'm gonna have this as my main color. I figured I'll make one with a darker main color instead, and this as my contrasting color. So these are 100% cotton. These have around 180 meters per 50 grams, but you could use a yarn that has a similar amount of meters or yards per grams, equaling about a sport weight yarn. You could also definitely use a fingering weight yarn or a DK weight yarn. It will just become a little bit more drapey and softer with a fingering, so a thinner weight yarn, or a bit more sturdy, and the fabric will be more dense if you use a DK, so a thicker weight yarn. For this, I'm going to be using a 3mm, so that's a US 2.5 circular needle. And you're also going to be needing 2 removable stitch markers, or you could also use some scrap yarn or just something that you can tie together and that you can then remove. So I'm going to be using these. And the gauge for this is 23 stitches per 10 centimeters or 4 inches. So I definitely recommend that you make a swatch gauge first to see that you hit 23 stitches per 10 centimeters. So I'm using 3mm needles because that is when I get that amount of stitches per 10 centimeters. You might have to go a little with a bigger needle size or a smaller needle size. So do that before we begin. All right, let's begin. So I've grabbed my yarn, and first we're going to be casting on stitches for the upper back. So I'm going to use the backwards loop cast on method, and for that I'm first just going to make a slip knot. So I make a loop like this, grab some yarn that goes to my yarn here, and take that through and tighten. And then I just insert my needle in there and tighten it around. And then what I do is I grab my yarn and then I just use my thumb and go over and under. And then I take my needle through here and start casting on stitches. So I have 2 stitches now, and you can check the pattern to see how many stitches you need for your size. So again, just measure yourself and see what size you want to do. This pattern does have some negative ease. So remember that when you are checking what size to make. I'm going to be knitting size small. So my bust is approximately 87 centimeters. That's approximately 34.25 inches. So that is the size that I am choosing. All right, I've now cast on all my stitches, and the first step is to work one setup row. So this is going to be on the wrong side, and on this setup row we're going to be placing our removable stitch markers, and these are going to mark where we're going to pick up stitches for the shoulder seams later on. So I'm just going to begin by purling, and then you purl X amount of stitches and place your removable stitch marker. And I always say to have patience here on the first row. It's always a little bit tight in the beginning when you've just cast on. That is totally normal. It will not be this tight moving forwards. All right, I've worked my 10 stitches. So now I'm going to be placing my stitch marker, but I'm going to be placing it here around the strand between the stitches. So not on the actual needle, but here between these stitches. And then we're just going to continue purling again until we place our next marker. There's my first markers. Then I've worked these stitches will be the back neck. And now I'm going to be placing my other stitch marker here again around the strand that is between here. So just place that around. And if you don't have these removable stitch markers, you could just have a small strand of yarn that you just tie together, because we're going to remove that later on anyways. And then just purl these last stitches, and then the setup row is complete. All right, that is setup row complete. So next up, the actual pattern starts. So now you have 6 rows of stockinette stitch, which means you're going to be knitting every right side row and then purling all the stitches on every wrong side row. So for 6 rows in total, and then we are going to change to the contrasting color, and I'll show you that in just a second. I've now worked 6 rows of stockinette stitch, and I had 1 setup row, but I don't count that in. So now it does come time to change color. And to do that, I'm just gonna grab my contrasting color, leave a little bit of a tail, and simply start knitting with that. But I'm not gonna cut my main color, so I'll just have my main color it will be a little bit of a float. But I just want to have, I don't want to cut every time, because then I'll have like a million ends to weave in at the end. So instead what I do is I will just have a little bit of a float on one of the edges. Now I've worked 2 rows in my contrasting color, so now it's time to switch to the main color again. So now I can just grab my main color from here, make sure to tighten it a little bit, but not too much, because this edge will also not be visible in the final piece. And then I just start to knit in my main color. You'll repeat these 6 rows in the main color and then these 2 rows in the contrasting color for X amount of rows. You have to check the pattern. It depends a little bit on what size you're working. And then we're gonna start to increase for the back. And you do this by making a make one right or make one left. So I will show you those before moving on. All of the shaping in the Sailor Swift top is made by working increases, either make one right or make one left. So I will show you those right now. So here I've just worked a stripe in CC, so it's gonna be easier to see for you. So first we're gonna make one left. And you always first knit the first 2 stitches when you make one left in the Sailor Swift top. And now we're gonna make one left, and it's called make one left because it leans to the left, and I always remember it that it's on the left side of whatever I'm working on. So now it's on the left side of these 2 stitches. And I'm gonna use my left needle and the strand here in between the stitches. You can see that here quite clearly. I'm gonna bring my left needle from the front and wrap that on my left needle. And I remember that I have to go in through the front when it's make one left, because an L is sort of an F turned upside down. So that is how I remember it. So now I have that strand on my needle, and then I can knit it, but I need to knit it through the back loop. So I insert my needle the back and wrap yarn. And then you can see that I've made one new stitch and this strand has been twisted. And I'm just gonna show you what happens if you do this and knit it from the front. Then you end up with this big hole. No. So always when you make one left, going through the front, because that's an L or an F turned upside down, and then you knit it through the back loop. And there you have it, make one left. It looks really nice and tidy, you can almost not see it. Make one right. So make one right in the Sailor Swift top is always done before the last 2 stitches. And here we're again going to locate that strand between the stitches. So that's this strand right over here. And this time again I'm going to use my left needle, but this time I'm going to go in through the back. So when we did make one left, we went in through the front like this, but make one right, we go in through the back or from the back and wrap the yarn away that way. And I remember that because a B is almost like an R, half of an R. So that is how I remember when it's make one right, I need to bring my left needle from the back. And this time we are going to work this from the front again, so that strand gets twisted, because otherwise if we would now knit this stitch from the back here, you end up with a hole. We don't want that. So when we have the strand make one right, we need to knit this from the front, and then I'll just knit these last 2 stitches, and there you have it, make one right. This is now the upper back piece complete. So here is where we cast on stitches, and we have those 2 stitch markers, and then we've increased, and then I've just put all of my stitches on hold just by using a piece of scrap yarn. And next up, we are going to be picking up stitches for the left and for the right and for the left front. First, we're going to pick up stitches for the left front. So that is when you have the cast on edge facing upwards and you have the piece facing you with the right side facing you. So the left front is this side. Here is where we put our removable stitch marker, and that marks the spot where we're going to start. So I'm going to start by just inserting my needle here. Then I grab some new yarn, and just wrap that around my needle and pull that through. So I'm picking up and knitting these stitches. So as you can see here, we have the stitch. So you can either pick up stitches in the actual stitch or then between the stitches. And I prefer to pick up stitches between the stitches. So I'll try to show you. So there you can see there is the actual stitch. So I'm not gonna go in that. I'm gonna go in here between these two stitches and grab my yarn. All right, I've picked up my stitches. So now we can go ahead and remove this marker. We won't be needing that one anymore. After we picked up stitches, first we work one setup row. So we're gonna turn around and work the wrong side first. So I'm just gonna purl all of these stitches. So this we count as the setup row. I've now worked the setup row, so I've purled all my stitches. Next up, you're just gonna continue again working 6 rows always in the main color and then 2 rows in the contrasting color and work just straight for X amount of rows. Again, check the pattern. And then we're gonna start working the neckline or shaping the neckline by working again increases. And for this one, the increases are gonna be here on the right side so that we get a nice kind of scoop here. And after that is complete, those stitches will be put on hold and we're gonna do exactly the same for the right side. So then you would pick up stitches here from the edge here until the stitch marker, work one setup row, purl, and then again work these stripes. And then when you work those, you work the increases, we're gonna join everything. So I will show you that next. Next up, we are going to join both the left and the right front. So I've now worked first, we worked the left front, worked some increases here, and then just worked the right front and worked some increases here. So this is now going to be our neckline. Next up, we're going to be joining the right and the left front by connecting both and casting on new stitches here in the middle. And this is going to be the neckline in the front. So for this, we are going to work in the contrasting color. So I have that here already. And here you can actually see these floats that we talked about before. So I have always the contrasting color or then the main color. It's just kind of there hanging on the side. So let's join these two together. So first, just knit all of these right front stitches. I have 16 in total. I worked all of the right front stitches. So next we're going to cast on new stitches by using the backwards loop method. So again, I just hold this yarn, use my thumb, and I go over and under, wrap it around, and then I use my right needle and I just go in through here, and then I tighten using my left hand, and then I've cast on one stitch, and then depending on the size, you're going to be casting on X amount of stitches here for the middle of the neckline. Again, make sure you don't have to tighten too much, because then it will be very difficult to work that first row. All right, that's my last one, and then I'm just gonna pick up the left front stitches, and then I just knit these as well and make sure that you don't get a gap in between so that you tighten there, and then knit all of these left front stitches as well. And there you have it. So now you've worked row 1. So next I'm just gonna purl this one and then work a few more rows of just this stripe pattern, just straight, and then again work some shaping, so some increases on each side so that the back and the front match each other. The upper body is now complete, and now it has come time to join everything in the round. Working with the main color, I'm first going to knit across all of the front stitches. So this is the working yarn and the piece that we've been working on. So you don't have to cut the yarn or anything, just continue and first knit across all of these front stitches. I'm coming here to the end now, so when you've worked across all of the front stitches, we're gonna be casting on new stitches here for the underarm. So again, using the backwards loop method, grabbing the yarn and just using my thumb, I cast on new stitches. All right, got the right amount, and then I've had my back stitches on hold here, so I need to transfer these stitches now onto my needle, and I need to do that so I have them ready to be worked with. So I'm just going to transfer them from my scrap yarn onto the working needle. I've transferred all my stitches onto my needle, so I can go ahead and remove my scrap yarn. Now I'm ready to connect my back stitches. So then I just knit across all of the back stitches. Now I've knitted across all of my back stitches as well. So now again, I'm going to be casting on new stitches here for the underarm, but this time I'm just going to cast on half the amount I just cast on, because then we're going to be placing the beginning of round marker, and we want that to be in the exact middle of one of the underarms. So I cast on half the amount I just cast on, then I place the beginning of round marker. So this is now the place where the round begins, and then I still cast on an additional amount, so I get the same amount that I just cast on. All right, so that's the round number 1, and then we just connect everything and start working the body in the round. Next, I want to show you a way to avoid having a big jog when creating these stripes, because when you are changing color, there might be this jog that appears, and you can see it a little bit here on my seam as well. Now, of course, I haven't blocked it yet, but I'm going to show you how to make it pretty good and invisible. I mean, you can see it a little bit, but if you wouldn't do this trick, it would be even more visible. I've just worked 6 rounds in my main color, so now it has come time for me to change to my contrasting color. So I've just slipped my beginning of round marker. Then I'm just going to grab my yarn, so I have all the time these yarns floating. For the first round, I'm just going to start to knit in the other color, so this time in my contrasting color, and I make sure that I don't pull or make this too tight, so it kind of sits nice and relaxed on the wrong side here. And for the first round, I'm just going to knit all of the stitches in my new color. At the beginning of the next round, when I start, I'm going to be picking up a loop of the old color. So this loop here from the previous round in the old color, I'm going to pick that up purlwise. So inserting my right needle into it purlwise, and then I'm just going to place it on my left needle. So now I have 2 loops there, and then those 2 I knit together with my new color. So this is the beginning of the second round. So I do this little trick, and then I continue knitting, and this is something that I do every time I insert a new color. So on the second round of that new color, and then you can see you get kind of like an elongated stitch here, which just makes it a little bit more seamless, so that you can see that the stripes, they're not kind of offset, but it looks really seamless. So then this I do as well when I change into the blue again, so my main color. I would knit 1 round, and on the second round I do this little trick where I pick up a loop of the previous round color, and then I knit them 2 together. Work the body in the round until the body measures from the underarm 29 centimeters, so that's 11.5 inches. Or of course you can also continue on as long as you want to fit your body, or you can make it shorter. For me, 29.5, so 11.5 inches is 13 of these stripes, but you can again customize it exactly to your preferences. Lastly, 2 rounds are worked in the main color before then switching over to a smaller size needle, and then we have a very small little rib hem here worked. I'm going to be changing over to a 2.5 millimeters, so that's a US 1.5 needle for my rib hem. For the rib hem, I'm going to work a twisted rib, so I'm going to knit 1 through the back loop and purl 1. So normally you would knit 1 from the front loop here, but I want it to be twisted. It just gives it a little bit more definition. So I'm going to knit it through the back loop, and then I purl 1, and then again I knit 1 through the back loop here, and I purl 1. So I create this twisted rib stitch, Again, knit one through the back loop. And then I purl one. And I repeat this all the way across for 6 rounds all in all. All right, I have now worked my rib hem, so that's 6 rounds. Now I'm gonna bind off using the Italian bind off method, but you can of course use any stretchy bind off method that you prefer. And I say a stretchy one because, as mentioned, this has negative E, so it's good to choose a stretchy bind off method. But I'm gonna show you how to use the Italian bind off method. For this, I've threaded my needle, or no, my needle, my yarn on a tapestry needle, and I've taken a pretty big chunk. So this is 3 to 4 times the entire circumference of my top. All right, to begin, there is a preparation step, and this is only done once, and then I'll kind of show you the sequence. So first, step 1 is to bring your needle purlwise through this first stitch, which is a knit stitch. So purlwise means that I'm going in from the right side here into this first stitch and pull all of the yarn through. All right, so that is the preparation step done. Now starts the sequence. So the way I remember how to do the Italian bind off is I always have a knit and a purl stitch on my needle, on the left needle first, or then it will always be a purl and a knit stitch. So now I have a knit stitch and a purl stitch, which means I am going to be inserting my needle from the back here, go between the knit and the purl stitch. And then I'm going to be inserting my needle into both of these stitches knitwise, because I have a knit stitch first. So then I need to go in knitwise through both, and I start by doing it in the purl stitch. So I go in knitwise to the back, like that. And then I do the same with the first stitch, which is a knit stitch, going through knitwise and take all of this yarn. I've gone in through knitwise through the purl stitch, then the knit stitch, and now I can just drop this knit stitch off the needle. And I might have to tighten it a little bit. All right, that's the first sequence done. Now I have a purl stitch, so this time I'm gonna go in purlwise and always starting from the second stitch. So I'm gonna go in purlwise first in the second stitch, take all my yarn through, and then I repeat with the first stitch, which is a knit stitch, going through purlwise. No, this was a purl stitch, sorry. And then I can also drop that off the needle. So those are the 2 sequences. So let's repeat one more time. So now I have a knit stitch and a purl stitch. So when there's a knit stitch first, I know I need to go in knitwise, and I need to do that from the back. So I need to first bring my needle between these 2 stitches. So I have my yarn in the front so that I can work the second stitch knitwise. And then I start always with the second stitch, going knitwise first through this one, that second stitch, which is a purl stitch. And then I also go knitwise through the first stitch, all my yarn through, and then I can go ahead and bind this off by just moving it, sliding it off the needle. All right, then again, I have a purl and a knit stitch, which means I'm going through these purlwise and always the second stitch first. So I start by going in purlwise through the knit stitch, which is the second stitch, and going through purlwise through the first stitch, which is a purl stitch, which is how I know that I have to go in purlwise through both of these stitches. And then I can go ahead and slide that off my left needle. And then I always like to also just tighten it a little bit. And here you can see you start getting this really nice seamless Italian bind off. And then just repeat across the entire hem. The Italian bind off method for sure is a little bit time consuming, but I just feel like it's worth it because it creates such a nice finish. All right, I've worked my Italian bind off all the way around. I only have one more stitch that I need to go in through purlwise. And then usually what I like to do, can just remove that needle. You can see there's a little bit of a weird kind of gap here. Then usually I still like to take, with my tapestry needle, I go in through this first knit stitch column here, and I just go in behind that to close this gap, so I tighten it a little bit. just to make it a little bit more seamless, and then I can just go ahead and weave in the end here on the wrong side. I wanted to share a little tip about weaving in the ends. So I like to use a really sharp tapestry needle instead of a blunt one, especially when you work with cotton yarns, because sometimes the cotton yarns, they might be more slippery than wool. So when I weave in my ends, I use a really sharp tapestry needle. And then what I do is usually I go in through a couple of different directions. So I kind of start here tracing some of the stitches, always weaving in the ends on the wrong side, of course. So I here now trace some, but then what I like to do is I break some of the yarn. So I try to really go in between the yarn. Can you see how that kind of breaks? It would be very hard with a blunt needle to kind of go in through between these strands, but when I use a really sharp needle, I can do that, and I just find that that helps keep the end in place better so it won't go unraveling. And then I just continue, go in a few more directions. Now it's not super neat, but it is on the wrong side, so it's okay. Could have made a little bit of a neater finish there. And then just cut that yarn in the end. And here on the right side, you can't see anything. All right, that is now the body section complete. So next we are going to do an I-cord bind off edge. Okie dokie, the final step is creating these I-cord edges. So we're gonna work one across the collar and then also for both armholes. So I've already actually gone ahead and done one for this armhole, and I just wanted to do that because I want to show you how much it will decrease in circumference when you make this I-cord. So here you can see without, and it looks pretty huge. And then when you compare it to this side that has the I-cord edge, it does take it in quite a few centimeters, so an inch or so. But then of course, then when you block it again, if you think like, oh wow, this now seems really tight, it is quite stretchy. So when you block it, then you can stretch it out a little bit, but the whole goal of this I-cord edge is to make it quite snug so that it will just fit nice around your body and you don't have to worry about any kind of gaping. So just wanted to show you that before. So I'm gonna show you how to work the I-cord edge around the collar, but the same technique of course applies for then both the armholes. For this, I'm going to be using again my 2.5 millimeters, so that's a 1.5 US needle. If you knit very tight, I definitely recommend to choose a bigger or larger size needle. I'm a fairly relaxed knitter, so I use this one, but beware, if you are a tight knitter, you might have to add a few stitches or just choose a larger needle, especially for the collar, because worst case scenario, you can't fit it over your head. That happened with my first sample, so just a little note there. I'm gonna start, so when looking at the piece in front of me from the left side, so that is this seam. So from this shoulder seam, that is where I'm going to be starting and picking up stitches. So I'm gonna grab some new yarn. Start by picking up the stitches in my left shoulder seam. You could also actually do it in the right. It doesn't make that much of a difference. And the rhythm for picking up stitches is approximately 2 stitches for every 3 stitches or 3 rows. But check the pattern to see exactly how many. Again, if you know that you're a really tight knitter, you might have to add a few. But approximately, I pick up 2 in each stitch, and then I skip 1. Then I pick up 1, 2, and then again I skip this next one and move ahead. And I continue this all the way around. Now I've picked up all of the stitches around the collar, and now I'm gonna start to work the I-cord edge. The first step is to cast on some new stitches using the knitted cast on method. So in this first stitch, I'm just going to knit that one. But instead of now dropping this stitch from my left to the right needle, I'm instead just going to slide that new stitch that I made. So I have now cast on one new stitch from that first stitch. Then I'm gonna do that once again. So I knit this stitch. And then again, instead of sliding it off, I'm just gonna move it onto my left needle. So now I'll cast on 2 new stitches. Do that once more. Now I've cast on 3 new stitches. This will be the 4th stitch that I've cast on, and then one more time. So I cast on until I have 5 stitches all in all. All right, so there you have it. So cast on 5 new stitches, and now the actual binding off begins. For this I-cord edge, we're gonna knit 2, purl 1, knit 1, and then knit the last 2 stitches together through the back loops. Let me show you. So first we're gonna knit 2. So I knit these first 2 stitches, 1, then I knit 2, then I'm gonna purl 1, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Then I again knit 1, and last step is to knit these 2 stitches together through the back. So I knit them 2 together, and now you should have 5 stitches, although it's very hard to see. So I have 5 stitches on this needle, and then what I do, I transfer all of them from the right to the left needle, 3, 4, 5, and then repeat. So then again, I start here, I knit 1, I knit 2, I purl 1, I knit 1, and then when I only have 1 stitch left, I knit that together through the back loop, these last 2 stitches, and then I have 5 stitches, and then I slide them all from the right needle to the left needle. And then this is what you will repeat until the end, so all the way across. The reason there is 1 purl stitch, so normally when you make an I-cord edge, you only have knit stitches, but I really wanted to have 1 purl stitch in there because I really want this to lay nice and flat and also kind of hug around this edge. So I tried many different ones when I was designing this and just came up with this solution. I found that that worked best, and it gave like a pretty thick, so it's not too narrow, this edge, but it still lays really nice and flat in place. So that is the reason that you have that purl stitch in there. All right, so now I've worked all of my stitches and I only have 5 stitches left. So when you come to this place, you have 5 stitches left. We are going to be sewing these last 5 stitches together with the cast on edge within at the beginning to create a really seamless join. So this I-cord edge looks really nice and neat. So for this, you need a tapestry needle and a little bit of a tail. So I've worked all of these stitches, and now I am just gonna gently pull out this needle. So now you see I have these 5 stitches, and with my tapestry needle, I am going to start by inserting it into this first stitch and just pull the yarn through. And here at the cast on edge, I'm just gonna locate that first stitch, and then I bring my yarn or my needle underneath that stitch, and then I pull gently, and then I go in through that same stitch here. And now I've joined this first stitch with the cast on edge, so then I do the same for all of them. So then I have my next stitch here. First, I just take my needle through that second stitch, pull the yarn. Then again here I locate a stitch, and then I bring my needle underneath, pull it through, and go in through that same stitch. So that's the stitch here, and pull my needle through. All right, and now I've sewn all of the stitches together. You can't really see the seam, And then I just finish it off by weaving in this end. Once the top is done, you can either choose to block it by soaking it or then by steam blocking it, which is what I'm doing right now. So I have my top just on a towel, then I have a damp kitchen towel, and then I'm just using the iron and just gently pressing so I get a lot of steam, and that will help the stitches to relax. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna stretch out, especially like these armholes, and the collar, shape it a little bit, because after you've done the I-cord edging, it might have gathered together a little bit. So then I just wanna make sure that everything is nice and smooth. And the grand reveal, ta-da! My Sailor Swift top in navy and cream is finally done, and this is the first time I'm wearing it. I steam blocked mine. You are very welcome to block yours by soaking it in cold to lukewarm water and then just drying it flat. What I did was I shaped these armholes and the collar a little bit when it was damp and when I steam blocked mine, just because I feel like especially like the fabric here might get a little like wrinkly around the I-cord edges, so those really smooth out when you either steam block it or just soak it in water. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope it was helpful for you and maybe you learned some new things and you feel confident to try out the Sailor Swift top. I will put the link to the pattern in the description below, so you can go and download the pattern for yourself and think of some nice color combinations. There is on Ravelry lots of color combinations of knitters who have knitted this, who tested this in different colors, and also I believe over on Instagram under the hashtag Sailor Swift top. All right, and if you want to see, of course, more of my photos, you can come and say hi. I'm over at Kutuvakika on Instagram. Also, please do tag me in your photos. I love to see your projects. And again, I hope this tutorial was helpful for you and that you still have some nice and sunny weather. Right now, it is raining here in Finland, but I'm hoping to get some sunny days so I can get to wear my Sailor Swift top outside. All right, that is it for me this time. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, bye!